Out of the distant past, a faded memory of a half-forgotten warrior. Whispers of a prophecy murmur like a meandering stream. A champion, descended from the valiant lineage of the ancient legendary warrior Headrick, appears with the world on his shoulders. The king relies upon him. The princess awaits rescue. The iconic ball of light, a mystic artifact, calls for him from across the sea. And in his lair, wreathed in burning shadows and generations of hate, the Dragon Lord resides. But every journey must begin somewhere. The descendant of Headrick no sooner steps into the wide world when he spies movement in the underbrush of the forest. The dappled sunlight catches, glints. The creature turns, wearing a sincere and stupefying smile, then attacks. The Dragon Quest slime is as iconic as any random encounter gets in the history of role-playing games. Nearly 40 years since its debut, the slime comes in many colors, many shapes, and many sizes. He chonk, but the blue variety remains the stout and smiling mascot. Well deserved. I mean, look at how adorable he is. Could you, in any conscience, slay even a single one on the road to the Dragon Lord if you were the descendant of Headrick? Or, a more relevant question, where did the slime come from? Now, I'm not asking how little baby slimes are born. Is there any precedent in myth or folklore for the savage droplet that appears in any number of RPGs? From the goos of Breath of Fire to the flans of Final Fantasy, the choo-choos of Zelda to the gels of Monster Rancher, the dittos of Pokemon to the Puyos of Puyo Puyo. The concept of a blob monster is splattered all over the place in video games, but who lays claim to the original? The lineage of inspiration traces back to, you guessed it, Dungeons and Dragons. The gelatinous cube, despite its oddly specific name, can claim the place of Headrick in the heritage of the humble slime. However, the line need not stop there. While it's difficult to pick out the trail of breadcrumbs past D&D, it's not impossible to find it, winding the narrow, uncamped paths of direct and indirect inspiration, exploring modern fiction backward in time toward ancient myth. I can tell you right away that there's no real archetype precedent for the slime in mythology of antiquity, so far as I can tell. Odysseus never battled a blue blob, and Heracles never had to steal the grin from a green goo. Neither did Jason have to pilfer the pockets of a purple sludge. Without going so far back, though, there is precedent in fiction, particularly in the work of one considered the Headrick of cosmic horror. That's right, Howard Phillips Lovecraft, better known as H.P. Lovecraft. His modern mythos is populated by mind-rending space deities and tentacled titans, but also by cyclopean monstrosities of amoebic physique. In his seminal novella, At the Mountains of Madness, the first Lovecraft book I ever read, Lovecraft describes an entity that harasses the survivors of an Antarctic expedition.
We had expected, upon looking back, to see a terrible and incredibly moving entity if the mists were thin enough, but of that entity we had formed a clear idea. What we did see, for the mists were indeed all too malignly thinned, was something altogether different and immeasurably more hideous and detestable. It was the utter objective embodiment of the fantastic novelist's thing that should not be, and its nearest comprehensible analog is a vast onrushing subway train as one sees it from a station platform, the great black front looming colossally out of infinite subterraneous distance, constellated with strangely colored lights, and filling the prodigious burrow as a piston fills a cylinder. We were on the track ahead as the nightmare plastic column of fetid black iridescence oozed tightly onward through its 15-foot sinus, gathering unholy speed and driving before it a spiral re-thickening cloud of the pallid abyss vapor. It was a terrible, indescribable thing vaster than any subway train, a shapeless congeries of protoplasmic bubbles, faintly self-luminous and with myriads of temporary eyes forming and unforming as pustules of greenish light all over the tunnel-filling front that bore down upon us, crushing the frantic penguins and slithering over the glistening floor that it and its kind had swept so evilly free of all litter. Still came that eldritch mocking cry, "Tekalili! Tekalili!" And at last we remembered that the demoniac Shoggoths, given life, thought, and plastic organ patterns solely by the old ones, and having no language save that which the doc groups expressed, had likewise no voice save the imitated accents of their bygone masters.
The Shoggoth, Lovecraft's slime, is about as far removed from the friendly Toriyama slime of Dragon Quest as petting a cat is from pilling a cat. These creatures defy description. Now, that doesn't mean that Lovecraft didn't try to describe it with his vast nonsensical vocabulary, but just seeing one was a terror beyond all rationality. It's a protoplasmic monster of iridescent ebon, an enraged milkshake of eyes and tendrils and oozy appendages. Shoggoths are a far cry from the slimes of Dragon Quest. We could do better than that. Leaving behind the glacial wastes of the Mountains of Madness, we turn our attention from the Antarctic Circle to the land of the rising sun. The Edo period, 1609. A shogun by the name of Tokugawa Ieyasu was out enjoying his gardens when a pungent smell of rotting flesh strikes his senses. He discovers a positively nausea-inducing intruder has violated the sanctity of his gardens, a bakemono. The shogun has the unsightly, stinking entity cast into the mountains, but kicks himself afterward when he discovers that the flesh of this creature is said to be a powerful panacea that can grant great strength, provided you could keep it down, I imagine. One of the many unique elements of Japanese religion and myth comes in the form of yokai. There's no real direct translation for what yokai means or what yokai are. No word that's truly helpful, because yokai covers such a broad range of supernatural entities and phenomena. But perhaps you can think of a good example of yokai in modern fiction today. All you need to understand now is that yokai came about from a host of beliefs, explaining the natural through a supernatural lens. From borrowed beliefs, beliefs meant to amuse or entertain, beliefs held in high regard as terrifying or sacred, beliefs about moral behavior. There's a particular classification of yokai known as bakemono, a thing that changes, in reference to the many shapeshifters that populated the old Japanese wilderness. These are sometimes referred to as ghosts, but were primarily living supernatural entities who transformed, such as Kitsune the fox, or Bakeneko the cat, or Tanuki the raccoon dog. It is within the Bakemono no e, or illustrations of supernatural creatures, that we find one of the references for our next creature of interest. What the shogun Ieyasu saw was the appearance of a rare yokai called Nuppeppo, a waddling lump of trouble of which has been written, "It has neither eye nor ear." Old Chinese writing describes similar creatures, some of them blobs about the size of a young child with fingerless hands. The Nuppeppo is a glob of some kind of fleshy substance with stumpy arms and legs, and a face comprised of a sad, soggy set of undefined features, lumps that could be mistaken for cheeks or nose, wrinkles that could be seen as eyes, sightless and wandering, The Nuppeppo devoured the fat of corpses near abandoned temples and graveyards. The humorous Charaban, or Book of Manners, included writing that read thus:
It sucks the fat of the dead and eats to the fullest with a needle. In the past, they'd come disguised as a doctor, but now they just come as is.
It generally went around repulsing people with its stink. It apparently gets a kick out of a human reaction to its own hideous putrescence. Maybe even more offensive than the fact that this nasty globule of meat was a necrophage. It's been said that the name Nuppeppo is a corruption of a slang for someone who wears too much makeup. The idea here, I guess, was to evoke too many layers of whitening, or white face powder that could heavily obscure the face underneath. Nuppeppo functions as both a kind of social parody and the aversion to the perversion or mutilation of the human face. Gross. It's difficult to understand how an obscene and obscure Edo period yokai, this hunk of stinking dead meat-eating muck meat, could ever have evolved conceptually into the happy-go-lucky slime of Dragon Quest. I don't know about you, but if I was on a quest to take down the Dragon Lord, I'd much rather run into a cute little blue slime than an insane Shoggoth or smelly Nuppeppo. How could you not love a monster that seems happy to see you? Perhaps the more accurate descendant of slime could be Master Belch from Earthbound. But that is a story for another day. If you learned something, hit the like button and subscribe so you won't miss any future episodes. If you want to see more micro-documentaries like this one, please consider making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/Gamelogica. If you have an idea for a topic we should explore along the crossroads of video games, religion, spirituality, and mythology, let us know in the comments. Fidem Fabula Ludos. See you next time.